All right, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining me. We'll go ahead and get started here. If you got your questions, go ahead and post them. Should be below the video. If you're on a smaller screen, to the right of the video. If you're on a larger screen, like a desktop computer. Excuse me. So let's scroll down and see what kind of questions we got. All right, looks like we got a few in there. A couple anyway. All right, so I'll start here with Rick I. It says, fractured 2 ribs on right side. Oh, dang, that sucks. During golf swing, I'm a 48-year-old. After coming back from injury, any suggestions on things to watch for in my swing? To be honest, Rick, I really don't know. I don't really know what. I mean, if you ever, as long as you're fully healed, I mean, it should be the same. It shouldn't be any issues. It's not like breaking your ribs is going to change like your motor patterns. But if it limited you in some sort of way, the only thing I would say is in the golf swing, if you're right-handed, there should be a little bit of this right lateral bend in the swing. That's what we see in the most athletic players. So if you're unable to do that, then you may have, from a physical ability standpoint, you may have to have some stand up a little bit in flip of the club. There's not much you can do about it. If you can't go like this because your ribs hurt or whatever, then you can only do what you're physically capable of doing. It doesn't mean that you cannot still hit good shots. It just means that you may not be able to go into. So let's say for example, you are a player that really rotates your body really well, right? Well, if you rotate your body really well, that means that you have to be shallowing out the club. If you're shallowing out the club, you have to be doing it with elements of your upper body. And that's what we want to do, right? We want to shallow the club with our upper body and rotate our body or rotate with the lower body, right? So let's say you're someone who did rotate really well in the downswing, and if you did that, then you more than likely had some ability to go into right lateral bend. So that's this here. And you can see how that would shallow out the club. So if I rotate and I go into right lateral bend, right, that allows me to shallow out the club. But if now I rotate and then I can't, so if I'm rotating my body, but I'm like this, right, well, look what happens to my club. Now I'm coming over the top. So that's not good. We don't want to really rotate our body a ton. You may be rotating and using your legs like a tour player, but if you can't use your upper body like a tour player, it's not going to help you, right? You're just going to come way over the top. So what you may have to do is you may have to stall your rotation, kind of early extend a little bit, some amount, to be able to get this club to work from the inside. Like I said, it's not ideal. It's not what the best players in the world do, but it may be what you need to do specifically to help you to play better golf. Because what it takes to hit a good golf shot, it takes ball first contact, center face contact, face and path aligned with where we want it to go. So if you're someone who rotated really well before and you went into right lateral bend when you did that, and now with a rib injury, you can no longer go into right lateral bend. Well, you need to do something else to be able to help you to shallow out the club. Now, it may be just adding more, wrist flexion, forearm rotation, shoulder movements. It may be doing that. If you didn't have a lot of those in your swing, you may be able to make up for the lack of right lateral bend you're doing with those to shallow out the club. Unfortunately, there's just no way for me to know without seeing your swing. But those would kind of be the things that I'd be looking out for. So what I would say is I wouldn't get totally bummed out. I think people get way too ideally, we would really be rotating our body open. We would be getting the club really shallowing out. We would be getting tons of shaft lean and doing all those things. But I think people feel like they're just going to be bad at golf forever if they can't do that. And that's just not the case. Those things make it easier to do things, but all it takes to hit a good golf shot is ball first contact. I'm sure there's guys that you see at wherever you play that are really good golfers, low handicap golfers, and don't do everything in the top speed golf system. It's because they're highly skilled and they know how to move with the way they're able to control the way that they move pretty well. even though that the way that they move isn't like the top notch what we see the best players in the world doing. So so that's kind of what I would be looking at. But yeah, it's hard to say without seeing your swing. And I don't know what the extent of your injuries are. It may, if you're completely healed and you're back to normal, then there may not be any, any things. It's just back to normal, right? And for all I know, if you had ribs removed or something like that, it may be you can go into right lateral bend more easily, and it may be the opposite issue or something like that. You need to work on rotating more. So hard to say, for sure, but those would kind of my thoughts on that. But I haven't, had the opportunity to work with anybody with that situation before, so I'm not really sure exactly. All right, let's keep going. So Mark N says, how do we clear the front hip and make weight transfer during the swing? I feel stuck on downswing and early extend, especially with short irons and driver. Thanks. So basically, from what I've experienced, it starts with getting the face to be in a proper place. Because if the club face is not in a good position, you're going to react to that in a certain way. Excuse me. And then it's just kind of like a snowball effect. Excuse me. Trying to clear my throat. So then it just ends up kind of being a snowball effect of things. So just kind of an example, let's say I go up to the top and this face is very open, right? So this club face is kind of pointing back, over my shoulder instead of more to the sky, right? If that is the case, then if I were to shallow out this club, swing from the inside, really rotate my body, get my hands way in front, this club face would be so wide open that it's not even funny. I would hit that ball so far to the right. So you are reacting to that, right? Your brain is saying, I don't want to do that. So what you'll do, or what you'll likely do, is you'll likely stay back on your back foot, stall your body, early extend the hips, and then flip the hands to be able to square up the face. That's more than likely, that's the most common thing that I see. I can't go over every little thing that could be going on with your swing, because one, it's not necessary, and two, most likely those aren't the things that are going on. There's a good chance that your face is open and you need to get it closed. That'd be the first thing. Now, just because you close the face doesn't mean that's going to solve all your problems. That's probably just the first step to things that you need to do. But that's what I would look at first, is getting that club face more closed. There's two ways to do that. The first way, and the easiest way, is to strengthen the grip. So that's basically getting the lead hand more on top of the grip, trail hand more under. If you think, I like the way I like to think about it is, think of the seam that's between your thumb and your hand, this crease right here. We want to get that kind of pointing more toward the right shoulder. That is going to be a stronger grip. That gets the face more closed at the top. You can see how my club face, if I have I can even have a little bit of cup in my wrist here at the top, and that club face will be pointing up to the sky, right? So that's that's what's going on there, and then that's going to help you to be in a better position as you're coming down. The other way is with wrist angles. So bowing the lead wrist, extending the trail wrist, that also closes the face. So you can see if I have a weak grip where my thumbs are more on top, right? And I go up to the top and I have a more bowed wrist at the top, you can see now that club face is more pointing up to the sky. That would be that'd be a way to close the face as well. And now if the face is closed, I'm now incentivized to swing from the inside and rotate my body. And if I swing from the inside, then I'm going to be incentivized to rotate my body. If I rotate my body, I'm going to be incentivized to get my hands in front. So it's excuse me, it's a trickle down effect. Sorry, my voice is scratchy today for some reason. It's a trickle down effect from where you were at the top of the swing with the club face. So that'd be the first thing that I would do. What I'd recommend doing is just working through our 20-minute shallowing fix and getting that club face closed, getting the ball start to the right and hook to the left for a right-handed golfer, and do that a lot, then tone it down. And that's what I'd recommend doing. Mark Ann goes, what causes pulls and pull hooks? So it's just exactly what I talked about, right? Where you're hanging back, right? And then swinging over the top because the face is open. You don't have any incentive to swing from the inside. So you got to get that club face closed to have incentive to swing from the inside. So get the face closed so that way you can swing from the inside, work through the 20-minute shallowing fix. So any drills to clearing the front hip, so here's the thing. A lot of people are really worried about getting their hips to open at impact, but that's not really what they need to work on. They need to work on the things that incentivize them to open up their body. So as I mentioned, you got to have the club face in a good position in order to shallow out the club. You have to shallow out the club in order to get the body to rotate. In order to get the body, in order to get shaft lean, you have to get the body, you can be incentivized to have shaft lean, you have to have the body to rotate. So it's a trickle down effect. It's not, how do I get my hands in front? Well, we got to look at what's the root cause as to why you're not getting the hands in front. The number one thing I see is the face is open. So people are reacting to that. So that's where I would start. There's no one drill that's just gonna, because I can get you to open up your hips, but that doesn't mean you're gonna hit good golf shots. If you're already hitting pulls and pull hooks, and then you open up your hips, you're just gonna be hitting even more pulls and pull hooks, right? So if I'm here, right, if I'm coming down, I'm already like this, which is gonna lead to a pull hook. And then I open my hips more. Well, look, my path is just even more out to in and steep. So I'm just going to hit even worse pulls and pull hooks. So you have to get the face in position first in order to get the club shallowing. And then you have to get the club shallowing in order to rotate the body. You have to rotate the body in order to get the hands in front at impact and have a nice stable flat face. So that's basically what you have to work through, and that's what the 20-minute shallowing fix is. So go work through the 20-minute shallowing fix. That's really, I know it doesn't seem like you're working on the hips rotating, but you're putting yourself in position to be able to make that happen. If you can't get the 20-minute shallowing fix to work, there's just no way you're ever going to get to the point to where you can work on opening up the hips, because you're not going to have any incentive to do it. Because opening up your hips is actually going to make you hit worse golf shots if you do that. You need to put yourself in a position where opening up your hips would actually make you hit better golf shots. And that's what the 20-minute shallowing fix is. So that's what I recommend doing. Hang tight, Gary. I was just kind of trying to answer Mark's subsequent questions, so that way we're bouncing all over the place. I'll get to your question here in a moment, but that's what we got to do. All right. And after Gary's question, I'll answer your thoughts on my thoughts on fat in thin pitch shots. All right. So Gary P says, over the months, your site has advocated different techniques to shallow the club on downswing. Can you summarize and critique each? So I don't know what everything has said, but basically what it comes down to is, I don't know every little thing our website is released. So just want to mention that. But what it comes down to shallow out the club. We want to use our upper body to shallow out the club. Some elements of our upper body, we don't want to use our lower body to shallow out the club. You can shallow out the club with the lower body, but ideally you wouldn't. Now, the only reason I would say you would want to shallow, if you have to use the lower body to shallow out the club, then you should. So, for example, a fella earlier was asking about, he had a rib injury. Well, it's possible he may need to use some elements of his lower body to shallow out the club because he's not able to get a little bit of a right side bend. It's possible that he may have some ribs removed. I don't really know the extent and what happened, but maybe he can actually go into more right side bend now because he doesn't have any ribs. I don't know exactly what went on there, but what it comes down to is we want to mostly shallow out the club with the upper body and not with the lower body. So with the lower body, there's two ways that I see people shallow out the club. One is really shooting this hip up and forward right away, right? So basically going like, if I do this, look what happens to the club. That shallows out the club. If I am like this, if my hips are flexed, right? So if you think of this as hip flexion, this is hip extension, right? If my hips are flexed, right, and I'm like this, and then I extend it, look what happens to the club. It shallows. So those are two ways to shallow out the club, but that's not what we want to do, because if I do this and if I do that, that is not going to allow me to rotate my body. And then if I don't rotate my body, it's going to be very difficult for me to get my hands in front of the ball at impact because my body's going to stall and my hands are going to want to flip. So we want to rotate the body with the lower body. And we want to shallow, get the club more behind us to match up with that. So here are the elements of the upper body that can shallow out the club. Now, you're not necessarily going to need to do all of these things. It may be a little bit of this, a little bit of that, right? But you have to kind of find your own recipe that allows you to shallow out the club. Some people have different ranges of motion. People are going to feel comfortable using some elements of shallowing versus others, but there are several combinations of things to do it, of ways to do it. You have to have some combination of these things. And this is what, if you look at every single tour player, you're going to see some combination of these things. Now, you do see some tour players that have some early extension in the swing. Jack Nicklaus had early extension in his swing. So meaning he had some of this in his swing to shallow out the club, right? So it doesn't mean you can't play well when you do that. But when we look at the best players, typically, what we're going to see is they're rotating with the lower body and then they're shallowing with the upper body almost entirely. All right. So what are the elements of the upper body that shallow out the club? So number one, we'll start with the wrists, would be flexion of the lead wrist. So you can think of that, the bowing of the wrist and extension of the trail wrist. That, if you look here, if I have my lead wrist in a neutral position, and then I bow that wrist and extend back my trail wrist, you can see how that shallows out the club, right? The good part about this is it also gets the club face more closed, right? So if I do that, you can see how that closes the club face. So this is a big reason why you see a lot of players doing this move, because it does both, right? You kill two birds with one stone here. You're getting the club to shallow a little bit, and you're getting the club face to square a little bit. Now, it's a tough thing for a lot of players to do because this coming down feels very weak for a lot of players. So that's why you don't see a lot of players. That's why you don't see every player doing it, right? But you see a lot of players doing it. So that is something that you can do. It's something that we don't necessarily. I'm not against it. I think that it would be great if everyone could do that. But what I found just working with hundreds of students is that it's easier for people to use a stronger grip and not use the strong wrist angles. So not that we want to eliminate that as a possibility to shallow out the club. It's if that's something that's easy for you to do, that's even better. But for most players, more neutral wrist angles. Now, on the opposite end of that, what would steepen the club? This, right? If I do that, flex my trail wrist and then extend back my lead wrist, so cupping in the lead wrist, that's going to do the opposite. And that's what I see a lot of players do. I see a lot of people opening up the face and also steepening up the shaft a little bit by getting the club in that position. So we don't want to be doing that. We want to have at least a neutral kind of position, ideally. Now, if you have a really long swing, like a Freddie Couples has a really long swing, Bubba Watson, you can get away. Like Freddie Couples has some cupping in his wrist at the top. You can get away with that if you are capable of getting it to come down. Because if you look at Freddie Couples, he's like this, and then he goes like that in the downswing. He kind of undoes it in the very beginning of the downswing. And he has time to do that because he has a longer swing. So you can do that. But again, we're talking like not everyone's Freddie Couples, right? So not everyone's going to be able to do that. But the wrist would be one area. Not something that we talk about a lot because it's just a very difficult thing for a lot of players to do. We generally talk in the 20-minute shallowing fix. We talk more about, we talk about doing either or, but strengthening the grip is generally the easier thing to get the club face close. And it usually strengthening the grip automatically just gets the club a little bit more shallow. All right. So wrists, it's this motion. And then if we look at forearms, it's going to be this kind of motion. So with my trail hand, that's kind of turning my palm up. With my lead hand, it would be kind of turning the back of my hand up or turning my palm down. Right. So that's this motion. You may have heard us talk about turning a doorknob, right? That's essentially what we're doing. So if I hold my elbows to my side here and turn the doorknob, that is an element to shallow out the club, right? So if I hold my club like this and I turn the doorknob, that shallows out the club. Another one is in our shoulder joints. So That would be losing an arm wrestling contest with my trail shoulder and winning an arm wrestling contest with my lead shoulder. If you imagine I'm driving my elbows, we talk about this in 20-minute shallowing fix, basically kind of chopping, driving with the elbows. That's doing those shoulder motions that I talked about. So that's referred to as external rotation of the trail shoulder, internal with the lead shoulder. That gets the elbows kind of driving forward, right? That gets those elbows kind of driving forward, and that also shallows out the club. That's one thing that we really advocate because that's a very, very powerful move that works really well and is a little bit easier for most people to do. And then the last piece is some element of that right side bend. So if you for a right-handed golfer, it'd be left side bend for left-handed golfer. So if you think if I keep my hips level here, and you can imagine my spine kind of curving, right, like this. That's what that is. So when I go up, if I go up to the top of the swing, I keep my hips level, and then I drop my right shoulder. You can see how that shallows out the club. So at the top of the swing, I want to have some left side bend, and then I work into right side bend. You can see how that shallows out the club, right? So those are the things that shallow out the club. Hopefully that makes sense, but those are basically the elements. Any video that we put out is going to be mostly probably talking about shallowing out the club with some element of what I just talked about, either wrist angles, forearm rotation, shoulder joints, or spine. It's going to be some element of that. All right. So Mark N asks about thoughts on thin and fat pitch shots. So typically, if we're hitting thin and fat pitch shots, it's because we're too handsy, and we need to use our body a little bit more. So or we're separating our arms from our body too much. So with pitching, we actually want to feel very connected, especially when we're around the greens. When we get farther away, we can get a little bit more disconnected. But when we're basically 30 yards and in, we want to feel like our arms stay pretty connected to our body. Now, I don't want you to hold them close to your body, but we want to feel like it's more, we're kind of turning our body. So it's more like this, right? So you can see how I'm just kind of turning my body. My trail arm is still on my side. My lead arm is connected to my chest. Right? And I turn through, and even when I come through, my arms are kind of on my side. So my arms aren't lifting way up or separating from my body. You can see if I'm doing that, I'm not moving my body at all. I'm just all arms. So that's typically what happens when we have trouble controlling our ground contact. It's typically from this kind of motion. So a lot of wrists, a lot of arms, right? And not enough body. So we need to unlock our ankles, our knees, our hips, and get our chest rotating back and through. And if you do that, you'll come in much more shallow, right? And you will be much more consistent with your ground contact. So that's what I would look at in your swing more than likely. It's hard for me to know for sure without seeing your swing, but if you're very wristy, very armsy, that will typically lead to poor contact on those shots. So I would work on getting the body to rotate more and have everything kind of working through together instead of being too handsy. All right, let's keep going. So Jeff Cooper says, Q, happy Thanksgiving. Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it. 1 year with you now, shooting 76-80 now. All the teaching that you, thank you, and Clay. Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. Glad to hear you're playing well. Sounds like you're on the right track with things. So we got about 35 minutes left. I am trying to get out of here to get on the road. So as long as you guys are asking questions, I'll stay on here. If not, I'll jump off. So I'll stay on here till noon as long as you guys are asking questions. If not, I'll go ahead and head out of here. So Mark N says, any differences in hitting driver versus 3-wood off the tee, need pointers? Yes and no. So there doesn't have to be. You can hit your 3-wood very similarly to the way you would hit your driver. Now, obviously, you wouldn't tee it up as high because a 3-wood face isn't as tall as a driver face. You would, if you tee it up as high as you would with a driver, you're opening yourself up to kind of just swinging right underneath the ball and just hitting the tee. So we want to have about half the ball above the tee, and then you wouldn't tee it quite as far forward as a driver. Because you're not teeing it up as high, so you don't have as much room to hit up on it. So you can hit it very, very similarly to the way you would with your driver. I would just tee it up to where about half the ball is above the crown of the club, and I wouldn't tee it quite as forward as the driver, but I would hit it the same way. The other way that you can hit your 3-wood off the tee is to hit it like you would out of the fairway, but you would only tee it up just a little bit off the ground, just kind of get it up off the grass a little bit. So that way, so basically you'd be just hitting it like you would out of the fairway, but it would be like you're hitting it out of a perfect lie. So there's 2 ways that you do it. I actually use both ways. If I'm trying to hit my 3-wood, basically, let's say it's a hole where, maybe I'm a little bit out of control with my driver and I'm a little bit more comfortable with my 3-wood, but I want to hit my 3-wood as far as possible. I would hit it just like I would, or I would try to hit it just like I would with my driver, and it just wouldn't go quite as far. Or maybe let's say, I don't want to hit it quite as far as my driver. So let's say I hit my driver 300 yards and I hit my, launched a really good 3-wood 270. Well, I might just try to hit if I'm needing 270 and definitely not 300, then I'll hit it that way. But if I'm needing like a 240, 250 yard shot, I may hit it like I would out of the fairway, because that's kind of the amount of distance that I would get out of the 3-wood out of the fairway would be like 250. So it just takes a little bit off of it, because when you hit it off the fairway, you're hitting down on it a little bit. So it will have a little bit more spin, and it will typically go a little bit lower and it won't go as far. So that's why you might do it that way a little bit. But generally, if you're trying to hit your 3-wood as far as you can, hit just like you would with your driver. So Mark N says, need help with hitting fairway woods, especially struggle with fat and thin shots, especially 3-wood. So if you're struggling with that, it's hard to say without seeing your swing, but the most often thing that I see is people are just have the ball way too far forward with their 3-wood. So what I would do is I would just try to hit your 3-wood exactly the same way you hit your 6-iron. You don't need to hit it any differently. Put it in the same ball position and pretend like you're hitting a 6-iron, and just do it the exact same way. Without seeing your swing, it's hard for me to know anything else that's going on. But if you're not chunking your 6-iron, hit it the exact same way that you do your 6-iron. One way you can do that is just go to the range, hit your 6-iron, hit some solid ones, then get your 3-wood out and just do the exact same thing that you just did. Play the same ball position, make the same swing, and you'll more than likely start hitting it a lot more solid. My guess is that you just have the ball positioned too far forward, and you're trying to hit up on it when the ball's on the ground. And when you do that, you're just gonna, if you hit the ground, you're gonna chunk it because the ground's in the way right before the ball. And if you miss the ground, the club's gonna work up into the ball a little bit, and then you're gonna hit it low on the face. So hit down and through that ball like you would a 6-iron. So Irwin says, can you talk about pivoting around the front leg? Yeah, so basically pivoting in the downswing, what we're going to do from the top is this lead leg is actually going to flex. So when I'm talking about flexing, I'm talking about in the hips and in the knee, right? So flexing is this in the knees, and then flexing is this in the hips. So there's going to be some amount of that in the start of the downswing. And then what's also going to happen is this leg's going to bow out. Right? So in the start of my downswing, I'm going to be here. I'm going to flex. I'll show you it from both angles. I'm going to be here. I'm going to flex in my hips and in my knee. And as I'm doing that, my leg is going to bow out. Right? So it's going to bow. You think of it bowing out. It's kind of, my knee is going from pointing toward where the golf ball was, or where the golf ball is, to pointing out toward the target. So it's bowing out with that flex in it. And then through contact, it's going to be straightening out into the full finish. Right? So from this angle, it would look like this. It's a little bit hard to see the front. I'll do it this way. Look at it from the front angle here. So I'm coming down. It's flexing and bowing out, and then it's straightening as I'm coming into contact, and then I'm coming around and it's straightening as I'm coming around to the full finish. Right? So in fluid motion, it would kind of look like this. Right? From this angle, I'm going to use a shorter club here so that way I don't hit my wall. But from this angle, trying to get some more room here, it would look like this. All right, so see how it's flexing, bowing out, and then straightening. That's what we want to do as we pivot around that front leg. So Charles says, do you have any pointers for reading greens? Yeah, so basically you want to try to find where the dead straight putt is. if you can find where the dead straight putt is, either uphill or downhill, then you can figure out, where your putt is going to go. So let's say my ball, let's say I'm putting, to the mirror over there, right? I'm putting to that. And let's say I found that the straight uphill putt was right here. Well, I know that putt there is going to be left to right. It's going to break to the right, because if this is straight uphill, it's going to break to the right, some amount, and then but it's going to be uphill. So that's basically what I would try to do. And then I would try to get to where you can feel that in your feet. So I kind of walk around, and see, okay, well, it's really flat right here. I can feel, in my feet as I'm walking over here, I can feel it kind of sloping off this way. It's uphill, right? You can also kind of look at the grain a little bit, depending on the style of grass. Some greens are more grainy than others. But you can look at the hole and kind of see where the grass is overgrowing, where it's clean cut and where it's kind of rough. On the side where it's clean, that is it's going to be, this, I guess the side where it's rough is where that's the direction the grain is going, right? So you could think of, if you have a left or right putt and the grain's going in that direction, it may break a little bit more than what you think. If it's an uphill putt and you're going into the grain, you may think it's a little bit slow, so you may need to hit it harder. If it's downhill, but it's down grain, right, then it's going to be super fast, right? So just some things to consider, or like kind of seeing where the grain is. I would say that's more advanced. Once you kind of get good at reading the slopes of the grain, then you can start actually to see like the nuances and what the grain does. Because it does make a small amount of difference, but it's not like huge. So that's why you see like tour players and stuff talk about that, because it does make a difference. But I think for the everyday player, most players aren't going to notice because they're just not good at reading the slope enough. But tour players are on greens every day reading slope and things like that. They also have the topography of the green, and a lot of that information is available. So if there's a place that you play a lot, you could probably get the information for the topography of the green, showing where the breaks are, and then go out there with that and essentially kind of see what's going on. And then the more you play a course, the better you're going to know, okay, I know this putt's going to break this way or that way, or so on and so forth. So playing the greens a lot, what I would say is, if you're going to a course that you've never played before, don't expect to read the greens really well. I think that's an unreasonable expectation, to go out and just go lights out with putting. If you do, it's honestly just more luck than anything else. You may be someone who's exceptionally good at reading greens, and you may just not have any issues with that. But if it took you a while to kind of get used to the greens that you play very frequently, and then you go to a new course you've never played before, and you expect to have the same kind of putting day, it's just not. It's an unreasonable expectation, in my opinion, because you just don't know the greens well. It takes a minute to like learn the greens. So, but if you have information like the topography and things like that, you can learn the greens a lot faster. So that'd be another way. But the best thing I can tell you to do is get a sense and feel in your feet for how much the green is breaking. Get behind the ball. Don't get directly, like I wouldn't read the green directly behind the ball, like right here. I would get 10, 20 feet behind the ball, so that way you can actually see the slope. But actually look at the slope between the golf ball and the hole, and not the slope beyond the hole, because that slope doesn't matter, right? It's the slope between the ball and the hole. So make sure you're kind of paying attention to that, and not everything that's kind of on the horizon behind the hole. So that'd be kind of my best advice for that. All right, let's keep going. So Evans looks like he might be having a little bit of issue typing a question. So hopefully you can get that figured out. Gary P says, my sand trap shots tend to be slight pulls with good distance control. Previously told me to aim more right. Club face direction is causing misdirection. Swinging more right seems not address club face direction issue. Can you clarify? Yeah, aim more right, not swing more right. Aim more right. So if you're hitting the ball in the same direction, if you're lining up your body and it's going in the same direction consistently every time, then just adjust your body. You don't need to adjust your swing in any way. Take the same exact swing, just change your alignment of your body. That's all I would recommend you do. All right. So, like I said, I'll stay on here as long as you guys are asking questions. I'll give you guys another minute to ask a question, but if we don't have any, then I'll jump off here. So Mark N says, any thoughts on course strategy? Seem to come up short on greens. May start using backyard. I mean, if you consistently or very frequently are coming up short of greens, I definitely use the backyardage because, and I would actually say that might be just a good thought in general for most people because if you think about it, if you're aiming for the back of the green, the backyardage. That's basically if you hit it really solid, that's where it's going to go, right? If you just mishit it slightly, then it's just going to go short of that. But if you're always aiming at the exact yardage, right, then you have to hit a dead solid shot to be able to get there. And that if that's just not something that you're always doing, I mean, I don't know what your handicap level is, but unless you're just a low single digit handicap, that's just not something you're probably going to be doing a lot of the time. So you're typically going to be better off. Players are typically going to be better off aiming to the back of the green because they're just not going to hit it dead. Even myself, I don't play as much as I used to, so I don't hit as many shots as really solid shots as I used to. But just taking a little bit extra, aiming a little bit past the flag isn't necessarily a bad thing. Worst case scenario, you just hit it past the flag. The more often scenario is probably that you're going to hit it closer to the yards that you want to. And then if you don't, if you really don't hit it very solid, then at least you're not going to be way short. You may still end up on the green or something like that. So that's what, I would definitely recommend that for sure. What do you mean by when you say back yardage? So back yardage would just mean the yardage to the back of the green. So generally, when they have the yardage markers on the course, they're measuring that from the middle of the green. So if the green is 40 yards deep, then the back of the green may be another 20 yards. I think most people would actually benefit from using an extra club. Now, if you find that you're consistently hitting it past the hole all the time, then you can maybe use a half an extra club. And if you still find that you're hitting it past the hole all the time, then you could, then you're at that point, you're probably just hitting it solid, or you're hitting it farther than what you think you are, right? And then you can just kind of adjust that. But if you're consistently short, if that's something that happens a lot, then I would definitely be trying to aim at the back yardage. The only time I wouldn't do that is if it's just, if you go just a little bit long, that it would be just a catastrophic issue. Meaning, let's say that there's water directly, over the back edge of the green, like it's penalty strokes, right? That would be a situation where I would maybe be as aggressive. I would be pretty happy with, if I hit a really solid shot, I'm going to be, at the hole. What I would still need to come to terms with the fact that if I hit it a little bit short, it's going to be, if I don't hit it quite as solid, it's going to be short of the hole. And then, doesn't necessarily have to be water, but maybe it's woods or something like that directly behind the green, close to the back of the green. But if it's no different being 20 yards short of the green and being 20 yards long of the green, then may as well you're going to be better off just trying to go, a little bit longer, right? So that's the way I would kind of look at it. Happy Thanksgiving. All toss. I appreciate that, Mark. Happy Thanksgiving to you too. Charles says ditto. Yeah, thanks, Charles. Appreciate it. So BJ says, what are your thoughts on perfect putting mat by Practice Perfect? Looks like you have one. I don't actually have one. This is a knockoff. This is a Christmas gift from last year. I probably wouldn't buy one of these again. It's just the balls they get stuck in there and they don't roll back, and I don't know. It doesn't really lay flat very well. I've had other putting mats that I like a little bit more. But the other putting mats that I've had that I like a little bit more are ones that are a little bit, they take up a lot more space. The birdie ball mat, I really like that. They actually have one now that you can roll it up to it. I haven't used that one, but it looks kind of cool. I would consider getting one. The only thing that stinks about it is that it takes up a big footprint, and it's hard to kind of just roll up and put away. This one I can roll up and put away if I want. So the portability of it is nice, but I would say, the quality of the perfect, like, I don't know how much this is, but I'm guessing it's a fraction of the cost of the perfect. I think they're so expensive. Honestly, I'm sure they're well made and they're wood and they look nice and everything. And Dustin Johnson uses it, but I think they're overpriced, and I would never pay for one just because I just think there's, better options out there. But if that's no option to you, I do like the concept of it. If it was better quality and actually worked and rolled the balls back and all that stuff, maybe the perfect practice mat does it. And it's not my floor because I've used it in different areas in my house at different angles and stuff like that, and it does the same thing. So it's just not sloped enough to get it to roll back. That's just poor quality craftsmanship. And it may just be because it's a knockoff and not because it's the name brand. If you do get one, if money isn't an option, I do like the look of it and all that stuff, but yeah, it's not the perfect putting mat. It's the knockoff. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend buying this one. So FK says, how long do you maintain trail wrist extension? Is it until impact? Well, you're not maintaining it. So it's not like you're creating that wrist extension. So I think what you're talking about is this. You're not maintaining it and then letting it go. It's kind of gradual. So it maxes out essentially kind of as you're coming down in the downswing. And then from there, it's going to gradually, your wrist is going to gradually kind of go like that until you release it. So you're not really, I guess the answer to your question is here, from somewhere between the top of the swing and lead arm parallel is when it's going to be maxed out, right? And then it's going to be gradually working and losing that extension into the release. So Dan S says, not a fan of the ramp to the hole since few greens like that putting mat. Yeah. So what I would say to that is that doesn't bother me. I'd rather have a ramp to the hole and actually see a ball drop into the hole than just like a flat nothing. That's why I would say the birdie ball mats, the one that I got a long time ago, that's just like the flat. I got like a 13-foot mat. They roll really nice, but you can actually, the ball, they're thick enough. I think they're like a half inch or 3/4 inch thick, and they have little cups in them. So it will actually drop into the hole. So I think it's a happy medium where there's not a ramp up to it. But at the same time, there's enough of a drop off that it will go down in it. And they're for a lot more real estate to putt on. They're around a similar price point. I don't know what they are nowadays. I got mine. I think I got that birdie ball thing like 8 years ago, and I still have it. It's kind of in storage. I get it out every now and then, but it does take up a fair amount of space. Which, if you have a lot of space and you just want to have something kind of that's almost necessarily permanent, but something that's kind of just that's going to be there all the time, then I think those are definitely pretty good. Cleaning them is a little bit of an issue. They do get dirty and they're hard to clean. You can't really vacuum it because I've tried. It just doesn't really work. And then taking the broom to it doesn't really work that great either. So they do kind of get dirty. So mine has kind of stayed in my garage, and I haven't moved it in or out because I just don't. It's all dirty. I don't want to bring it into my house. So, but eventually they do get kind of dirty. All right. If we have any more questions, let me know. Dan S says, have a nice and safe trip. Appreciate that, Dan. Yeah, so we'll go ahead and wrap it up unless anybody's got any last minute questions. Like I said, no office hours tomorrow or Friday. We'll be back here Monday, 5 p.m. Eastern time. Everybody have a great holiday for those who are celebrating. And we'll talk to you next time.